Hey everyone, ready to go a little deeper into space history?
Always. What are we diving into today?
Well, I was thinking, we hear a lot about NASA and the American space program, but what about Russia?
Yeah. Russia tends to get overshadowed when it comes to space,
Yeah.
even though they have this incredible, impressive history.
Right. Like, I was reading this article called History of Russia's Space Program,
Okay.
and I was blown away by how much they've accomplished.
Yeah. It's really remarkable.
Like, everyone remembers Sputnik, of course, but it's
Oh.
like 1957, this little beeping satellite,
Right.
and it just, captivated the entire world.
Yeah.
But I was reading more into it,
Hmm.
and I realized, it wasn't just about launching a satellite.
Right.
This was a huge deal during the Cold War.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine, right? Like, the global reaction to that
Yeah.
must have been just incredible when all of a sudden the Soviet Union shows they can put something in orbit.
Oh, yeah. It's like suddenly it's not just about science anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
are there going to be Soviet weapons in space?
It was a military, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What are the implications of this?
Yeah, so Sputnik, it wasn't just a scientific achievement.
Mhm.
It was this huge geopolitical,
Well, yeah.
game changer.
Absolutely. It really triggered this, what we call the space race,
Yeah,
where everybody suddenly had to catch up.
yeah.
And so government started pouring resources into research and development.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just building bigger rockets. It was like pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
Yeah. And that kind of leads us into, Yuri Gagarin, right?
Yeah. 1961, first human in space.
The first human to ever journey into space.
What a moment.
What a moment in history.
And I think, what gets me is thinking about those early cosmonauts, the courage
Oh, yeah.
to get into essentially these experimental vehicles
Yeah.
and blast off into the unknown.
Yeah.
I mean, they really didn't know.
Yeah, the bravery is
That's
just
about bravery.
incredible. And the training, I mean, they must have gone through just unbelievable, intense training.
Oh, absolutely. The physical demands, of course,
Yeah.
but the mental discipline, too. I mean, they had to be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
And have complete mastery over these incredibly complex systems.
Yeah, and so Gagarin's flight, again, it wasn't just a scientific milestone. He became a global icon.
Global icon, absolutely.
Mhm.
Symbol of Soviet achievement,
Mm.
his picture was everywhere.
Yeah.
Powerful propaganda tool during the Cold War.
Right.
It's like, look, living proof of what the Soviet Union can do.
And then, fast forward just a few years later, in 1963,
Mhm.
Valentina Tereshkova becomes the first woman in space.
Absolutely.
That's got to be another just pivotal moment.
Oh, absolutely. Shattering glass ceilings, right. I mean, Tereshkova, who, by the way, was a textile worker before becoming a cosmonaut,
Oh, wow.
showed the world that space exploration, this was for everyone.
Wow.
And her story still inspires people today,
Mhm.
especially women in STEM fields all over the world,
Yeah.
all thanks to that mission.
So, I mean, from a beeping beach ball in space to putting humans in orbit, it seems like in those early years, Russia was just the dominant force
They were killing.
in space exploration.
They were, on it. But I think it's important to remember, this was just the beginning. They had much bigger goals in mind,
Oh, okay. Like what?
like building the world's first space stations.
Okay.
And that's where the Salyut program comes in.
The Salyut program. See, now that's something that I got to admit, I don't know a lot about.
Yeah, it often gets overlooked, but
Yeah.
starting in 1971,
Okay.
the Soviet Union launched a series of space stations,
Really?
the very first of their kind.
Oh.
Now, these were much simpler than what we have today, but it was about testing the waters, figuring out, okay, how do we actually live and work in space for longer periods of time?
Mir. Now that's one name even I recognize. I mean, that felt like such a huge leap forward at the time, like this massive space station that just kept growing and changing.
It really was remarkable. Just imagine a space station that was designed from the ground up to be modular.
Modular. So what does that mean exactly?
So instead of one big pre-built structure, they launched individual modules, like building blocks,
Oh.
and they assembled them in space.
Whoa, so they were literally building a space station in space.
Exactly.
That's wild. Why do it that way? What's the advantage?
So that way they could expand and upgrade Mir over time. They could add new laboratories, living quarters, even entire docking ports for different kinds of spacecraft.
Wow. So it was like future-proofing.
It's really smart, yeah.
That's incredible.
And it extended Mir's lifespan, which, by the way, ended up being way longer than anyone expected.
Oh, wow.
But it also, like, paved the way for the kind of international collaborations that we see on the International Space Station.
Oh, right, the ISS.
Exactly.
So Mir was kind of like a proving ground for working together in space.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, Mir hosted astronauts and cosmonauts from all over the world. So, from all different countries, different backgrounds. And they conducted groundbreaking research. They learned from each other's expertise and really proved that international cooperation in space was, like, not just possible, it was beneficial for everybody.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. You mentioned research. What kind of stuff were they studying up there?
Oh, man, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Mir was like a hub for all these different experiments.
Okay.
Everything from studying the effects of long-duration spaceflight on the human body, which is really important when you think about it.
Yeah.
But also things like astrophysics research and even just like growing plants in microgravity.
Yeah.
The knowledge gained from Mir's research is still shaping our understanding of space and its effects, honestly.
That's amazing. Okay. So we're starting to really see how, like, Russia's space program has had this really lasting impact.
Oh, for sure.
And speaking of lasting impact, we can't forget about the Soyuz spacecraft.
Oh, yeah.
That thing has been around for decades and is still going strong.
The Soyuz is, no question, a testament to Russian engineering. First launched in 1967.
Okay.
It's the longest-serving human spacecraft in history.
Wow. Okay, so what makes it so special? Because there have been other spacecraft,
Yeah.
So why has this one endured?
I think it comes down to a few key factors. First, it's just incredibly reliable.
Okay.
Like, they've refined the design over the years, but the core concept has remained the same. And it's just proven itself time and time again.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Pretty much, yeah. But it's not just about reliability. It's also incredibly versatile. Like, it can transport astronauts to and from space stations. It can be used for standalone missions. It's even capable of performing, like, maneuvers in space.
Yeah.
Like docking with other spacecraft, things like that.
It's like the Swiss Army knife of spacecraft.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And that versatility has made it like such an invaluable tool for space exploration, especially during those times when other spacecraft, like the space shuttles, were grounded.
Oh, that's right. When the space shuttles were retired, the Soyuz was like the only way to get astronauts to and from the International Space Station.
Exactly.
Talk about being indispensable.
Right. But even today, with new players like SpaceX entering the scene, the Soyuz remains this, like, really crucial part of the global space community. But, beyond the present, Russia has its sights set on some pretty big goals for the future.
Okay, so let's talk about the future. What's next for Russia in space? Because I've heard, these whispers of lunar bases and Mars missions.
Yep.
It's out there.
Is any of it for real?
Oh, it's for real. Russia's made it very clear that they're not slowing down when it comes to space exploration.
Cool.
They have some really bold plans in the works, and they are actively pursuing collaborations to make these plans a reality.
Collaborations. So they're working with other countries?
Absolutely. Because, space exploration is becoming increasingly complex and expensive. So it makes a lot of sense to pool resources and expertise.
That makes sense.
And Russia has this long history of successful international collaborations, all the way back to Mir. So who are they teaming up with these days? Is it like old allies, or are we talking like new partnerships?
It's kind of a mix of both, actually. They're still working really closely with agencies like the European Space Agency and, of course, NASA on the International Space Station.
Right.
But there are some new collaborations, too, like particularly with China.
China. Now, that's interesting because their space program has really been kind of taking off lately.
For sure.
So what are they working on together?
Well, one of the biggest projects is this joint lunar research station.
Whoa, hold on. A lunar research station?
Yeah.
So like a permanent base on the moon?
Basically. They're still in the planning phase, but it has incredible potential to really change the game for lunar exploration. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so what are the advantages of having a permanent base on the moon?
Well, first of all, it gives us this platform, right, to conduct these really long-term scientific research projects.
Right.
So you can really study the lunar environment in detail. We can learn more about the moon's history, the geology,
Yeah.
and we could even use it as like a testing ground for technologies that we might use for future missions even further out, like Mars.
So the moon becomes kind of like a stepping stone.
Exactly.
That's really cool.
It's huge. And, from like a more practical standpoint, it could also serve as like a launching point for these deeper space missions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Because the moon's gravity is so much lower,
Right.
it's much easier to launch rockets from there,
Yeah.
which could significantly reduce like the cost and the complexity of these missions in the future.
Okay. So that's international collaborations, lunar bases. What else is on the horizon? What about Mars? Because I know that Russia's been interested in the red planet for a very long time.
Oh yeah, they haven't given up on Mars.
Yeah.
They've made it clear that they definitely want to send humans to Mars eventually.
Okay.
But in the meantime, they're continuing to collaborate on these robotic missions like the ExoMars program, which is actually a joint effort with the European Space Agency.
Okay.
And they are searching for signs of past or even present life on Mars, which is really cool.
Searching for life on Mars. Man, that is some next level exploration.
It's incredible when you think about how far we've come from that little Sputnik satellite.
I know, right. It's crazy.
It's remarkable. Russia's space program has been through so many transformations over the years, from the Cold War to this future of global cooperation
Right.
and shared ambition. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even in a world that often feels really divided, it seems like science and exploration can still bring people together.
It's true. The pursuit of knowledge, it goes beyond all of that. And when we set our sights on something as vast and as awe-inspiring as space, it's hard not to feel this sense of, like, shared wonder and excitement for what we could find out there.
So well said. So for our listeners who want a quick recap, what are the key takeaways about Russia's role in space?
Russia. They've been pioneers from the get-go.
Okay.
From launching that very first satellite, sending the first human into space, building the first space stations, they developed the most reliable spacecraft in history.
Wow.
Their contributions have been amazing.
And despite facing, their own share of challenges over the years,
For sure.
they've shown like this incredible resilience
Yeah.
and this drive to just keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible up there
Oh, 100%.
in space.
Yeah. And looking forward, it's obvious that Russia is going to remain a major player in this whole thing.
Yeah.
They're forging new partnerships, pursuing these ambitious goals, and I think, they're going to shape our understanding of the cosmos for years to come.
Well, I gotta say, this has been a really incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about kind of a side of space history that I knew surprisingly little about.
Me too. It's a fascinating story.
It really is.
And it's not over yet.
Yeah.
So everybody listening, please keep exploring, keep learning, keep looking up at the stars, and who knows what we'll discover out there.
Beautifully said. And on that note, a huge thank you to everyone listening for joining us on this journey into Russia's incredible space program. Until next time.